Joel never had a chance to actually be like a kid. There was a lot of early growing up that he had to do. And I think that was also part of his decision. He's like, I really want Ellie to have the thing that I never had.
I think you're right. I think a lot of this is him trying to give her a childhood, like given all of these extreme circumstances, given everything that is happening, everything that he's been through, everything that she's been through. Yeah. Now that we have some stability, I can try to create not just normalcy for her, but like childlike joy and wonder, right? With the birthday cakes and the guitar and this trip to the museum, you get to see how much of a child Ellie really is.
Yes.
Which is so delightful. And also, shout out to Bella Ramsey. Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we are here to talk about The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6.
This was a good one. Directed by Neil Druckmann, or at least that scene on the porch was directed by Neil Druckmann.
Yeah, I gotta look at the credit to see who the actual directing credit goes to.
Yeah.
But these episodes of The Last of Us are my favorite episodes. The ones where we're like, let's just forget about the zombies for a second. I love all the episodes, but like this reminds me of the episode we got last season with Nick Offerman.
Oh yeah.
It's like the same type of episode. It's told in like these vignettes. You're just kind of like building up the lore of these two characters. Mm-hmm. And it's like you kind of forget about the zombie apocalypse. You don't forget about it because it's still relevant, but it's the story and the elements that play between the characters are elements that exist even outside of this specific context of the show. I love it. I think that Last of Us does that so well.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I remember there were times when like The Walking Dead tried to do it, but every now and then it felt like maybe it was AMC telling them, oh, we got to throw in like some kind of jump scare or fight scene. The walkers had to come out. I don't always think that's necessary. I think sometimes studios underestimate how people watching will appreciate episodes like that.
Yeah. And it also is like, I think it's necessary for this genre because in any type of genre like this, whether it's aliens, zombies, anything like that, I think it is always beneficial to use the monsters sparingly because the more that you see them, the less scary they become because you just see they're not gonna die every time they fight them. Yeah. And so they don't become as much of a threat. Every single time the infected show up in The Last of Us, I personally am terrified. When you think about it, we don't really see them that often.
Yeah.
Once every couple of episodes, you will sometimes get a few episodes in a row where they have an encounter with them, but it's not a constant thing. Mm-hmm. And so there is a real sense of danger whenever they do show up.
I get the sense, and this is not me trying to like throw shade at like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, but I get the sense that Neil Druckmann has a lot more say in the creative decisions than George R. R. Martin did. He seems to be a little bit more in conversation and collaboration with Craig Mazin, but there are times where you could sort of read between the lines with what George R. R. Martin would say, and sometimes in his blogs where it'd be like, oh, there's clear frustration in some of the decisions that they're making.
I don't know what the real reason is, but I could see how the source material for the Game of Thrones would require, it would just require way more edits. Because there's just
the world is just massive.
It's too much. Yeah. Not too much in a bad way.
No.
The series is obviously a classic, but it's too much to adapt to a television show.
Yeah, when you only have like 8 to 10 episodes.
No matter how many episodes you got, in order for people to track along with the story this way, there's just certain things you can do in written format that you cannot do in the visual format.
So straight off the bat, this episode provided so much context for Joel that I feel like amplifies the game. We get this backstory with Joel that didn't exist in the video game, and it adds so much complexity to his character. At least for me, it shifts Joel's decision in season 1 with what he does with Ellie away from just solely about like unresolved trauma of what he went through with Sarah, and more so about that decision is something that was almost, I want to say, ingrained in him due to his childhood. Because like from a very young age, he had to take up this mantle of being a protector for his brother. And kind of like what Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann say, Joel almost develops like a savior complex through that. That isn't something that can just sort of like go away, right? Mm-hmm. Especially when you're dealing with something like losing your daughter and Sarah, that's going to like crystallize that even more. Joining all of those motives together, I genuinely believe makes him far more complex, and it makes, which I wouldn't guess I'd ever say this, makes his decision even more understandable for me with what he does with Ellie, in my opinion.
Yes, 100% agree. I think what that scene shows us is that for Joel, loving somebody has always been equated to protecting them and saving them.
Yes.
And so a failure to protect or save someone is a failure to properly love them from his perspective. And so he's like incapable of making decisions that put the people that he cares about at risk. I think he understands what he did for Ellie, that there's some selfishness to it. Yeah. But I also think he reads a lot of those things as extreme sacrifices as well. Like obviously with Tommy, he's putting his own body on the line right between them. For Ellie, I think he also reads that as a type of sacrifice too, as like he might lose her because she'll despise him for what he did, and that's a loss for him. Yeah. But he's incapable of making any other decision because he would rather that she hates him and lives than she dies, and he didn't do what he was supposed to do as someone who loves her and protect her. Yeah. So yeah, it almost is like he couldn't have made any other choice.
Well, he says it.
Yeah.
He says it. If you know, this were to happen again, I'd make the same decision.
And the thing is, you see on his face, he's ashamed.
Yes.
He is ashamed, but he is not regretful. Yeah. And that is a very interesting combination that you don't see often, because shame usually implies regret, but he's ashamed of what he did. He recognizes like the moral weight of it, and I think that is also a sacrifice to him. And
there's so much weight behind the line when Joel says, "When it's your turn, I hope you do a better job than me," echoing what his father said. And man, I'm not gonna lie, bro, that's what got me. Same. That's when I was starting to get a lot more emotional, because what we're seeing from Joel here is wrestling with just generational trauma, really. Mm-hmm. Right? Joel is seeing from his father's perspective, his father's inability to fully break away from what he's describing as like real trauma that he experienced when he was younger. And then he says that line to Joel, you know, I hope you do a little bit better than me, where his father is recognizing, because of the childhood that I had and that I had to endure, I wasn't able to be the best father, but I still wanted to be better than what I had. I think she is seeing that Joel is wrestling with these two worlds that he's existing in. The trauma has played like a significant impact in Joel's life, and sometimes that comes out. I think we see it in some of the ways that he's parenting Ellie. Even if he's not as violent, there is an aggressiveness that I don't think he likes, but some of it can be a little bit impulsive. And then there's these other moments, like what we see Joel do with the birthday that Ellie has. Holding those two truths, I think, is something that resonated with me so much, because it's like my parents did the exact same thing. And I know as a child, that can be very jarring, holding those two things together, because they feel so polarly opposite. But when you get older, you sort of realize that like there's just a little bit of a grace that I have been able to give them now that I just felt like when I was younger, I wasn't able to quite make sense out of.
As an adult, parenting or raising or helping children, you innately give them grace because you understand like these are children with a limited worldview and they're still growing and learning. Yeah. And so when they do things, there's always like this asterisk of like, that was bad, but like you are a child. But from a child's perspective, looking at adults are the people that are supposed to have it all figured out.
Right.
It's like it's a wake up call to the humanity and the vulnerability of their parents, that these are also people that are just doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
I feel like what that line really carries when his dad says it to him and when Joel says it to Ellie is like, I am loving you in the best way I know how.
Yes.
Like, this is the absolute best way that I can, recognizing that like it may not be enough, but it is the best that I have with the tools that I have. I think the other thing that some of these flashback scenes did was, I think they showed a lot about Ellie too. I mean, Ellie has always read as like a very rebellious person, a person who just kind of defies authority. Yeah. And I mean, we saw in season 1 how there was more to that, but I think the situation in season 1 was very different than what we see in this episode, because yes, she was accepting Joel as like a protector, some type of authority figure, but they were in this like high stakes, extremely dangerous situation where like it was life or death. Like she needed a person, you know? Yeah. What I enjoyed about this episode was this is the first time that we see that Ellie fully bought into this like father-daughter idea, even in a situation where she really didn't have to.
Yeah.
Like they're living in relative safety now. Things are calm. There's nothing legal here, right? But she still is like she accepts these roles in their lives, that like he is a father to me, even though they don't use the words, it's just implied in everything. Even their actions where things are more tense, it still feels that way. I think it also shows that if she could have just forgotten about Salt Lake City and just buried it, I think she would have rather done that. I just think she couldn't do it. Yeah. Like it was just always eating at her, and it was just slowly deteriorating their relationship and eating at this trust that she'd been able to build up to make us that she could accept this father-daughter relationship that they had. Which just makes it even more sad, because it shows like she wanted this, like she wanted this relationship. She wanted this dynamic between them, and they lost so much time, not just because of what happens to him, but because of how long he wasn't honest with her beforehand. And so over time, you could just see like she slowly starts to let him into less and less of her internal world. Like, I think the fact that she doesn't have a coming out conversation with him is interesting. You know, like obviously at some point he figures it out. Yeah. But like the fact that he finds her in a room with a girl, and then there's this weird thing where he's like experimenting. She's like, that's not what that was. But like that implies to me like there was a level of guardedness building up on her end, because she was recognizing that he was not being fully honest with her. And that's always going to put a rupture in how much you can trust somebody. So it starts internally with how much she's letting him in, and then it starts to seep into her external world. First, she's like moving out of her room into the garage, and then eventually, you know, there's like this turning point where she's completely alienating herself from him in general. Just this extra layer of tragedy, because if she could have had it any other way, she would have, but she just could not. And it's all because of his dishonesty. I honestly think had he told her, I think she would have been angry, but I do not think it would have played out like this. The betrayal wasn't just what he did. I think the betrayal was the lying for so long to her face. I think that's why she looks at him in that scene. It says, you swore, right? Yeah. And they noted like the change in language means it's actually a callback to the moment at the end of season 1, more so than the moment with Eugene earlier. Mm-hmm. I think that's the actual betrayal to her. It's like, you lied to my face about this thing after doing it already, which was, you know, already such a huge betrayal. And it's just sad.
So much of their relationship that Ellie has bought into is the fact that the father is the protector, right? And that was something that has shown up in their relationship quite often. But you can feel that, like, and I don't mean like physically, but she does not always feel safe with Joel as she used to before Salt Lake, right? Like obviously her not telling Joel about like her sexuality, but also There's like a genuine fear in when she had to write down the questions to ask him about like what happened with the Fireflies and the Raiders. And then when he knocks on the door, like she gets rattled. I also feel like we're seeing a little bit more in their relationship that I've noticed that I feel like adds to some of the characterization that they're giving Ellie in the show. Because Ellie, at least with this season, when we got a little bit more of like her separation from Joel, she's very reckless. Sometimes she can be a little bit more like aloof. Like she doesn't really always think about certain things. When she was with Joel, though, she was very locked in, right? When Joel was like, remember what I told you? And she was like, yes, I have your back and you're mine, right? Zero hesitation. She seemed very, on point with everything that was happening. And that felt like somewhat of a contrast to what we're seeing in other areas post losing Joel. And it just kind of made me feel like we're getting these moments where we're seeing Ellie was at her best when she was around him in a lot of those instances. And that makes it a little bit more tragic because I think as the season goes on, she'll sort of see that like who I am and the decisions that I'm making is become a little bit unrecognizable, which would make these scenes, if you were to go back and watch this season, like a lot more tragic.
It makes sense because when you feel safe, you are better. Like it's like a mental thing. It's like safety is like the very first thing that you need in order to make good decisions. And in any situation where you feel threatened or unsafe or exposed, all these other parts of your decision making start to falter.
When Ellie asks Joel to sing the guitar, that's actually such a very pivotal moment for both characters, because in the first game, Ellie asked Joel like what did you want to do like when you were growing up, and he wanted to be a singer. So when Joel was like, I don't sing, obviously like he's not being fully honest, but there's like some embarrassment to that as well. The reason why I feel like that is so important because it ties into the backstory we get about Joel when he was younger. There was a lot of early growing up that he had to do, right? He had to be a protector for Tommy, which love Tommy, but like you can see in the relationship that he even has with Maria, he's just better when there's someone there when it's not him, right? And you can maybe draw just a clear line of Joel's story where the opportunities he's providing with Ellie here, having the moment of self-exploration, of trying things, of learning more about yourself and enjoying like a genuine childhood and being able to try things was something that Joel couldn't have. And so the tragedy in that moment and that vulnerability just gives you more insight on all of the things that Joel probably had to give up when he was younger. And again, it just reminded me a lot of like kind of what our parents really had to do in a lot of instances where like when they are younger, they probably had all these dreams and aspirations. But especially in Joel's case, when you're like the older sibling, all those things just kind of get thrown out the window. You don't get the chance to explore other things that you wanted to. You don't have the freedom to pursue the career path that you wanted to because maybe your parents weren't that great or you were the older sibling and like you could see that you're the younger one, which I will admit my sister had to do that with me because I was a mess when I was a teenage kid. But I feel like all of that just adds more into the decisions that Joel makes in season 1 and 2 and the crystallizing of that, of him being able to not see it any other way, because Joel never had a chance to actually be like a kid. And I think that was also part of his decision. He's like, I really want Ellie to have the thing that I never had, which is a very real parent experience that I feel like a lot of us have heard them say in some variation.
The other thing that I was thinking about while we're watching the episode and we're seeing all these vignettes of like these birthdays, I think you're right. I think a lot of this is him trying to give her a childhood, like given all of these extreme circumstances, given everything that is happening, everything that he's been through, everything that she's been through. Yeah. Now that we have some stability, I can try to create not just normalcy for her, but like childlike joy and wonder, right? With the birthday cakes and the guitar and this, this trip to the museum that's like apparently like a big thing in the game. And you get to see how much of a child Ellie really is, which is so delightful. And also shout out to Bella Ramsey. But I also feel like part of it to me reads as him feeling like he's on borrowed time, because I think he knows she will find out. And I think part of him like doing all these big extravagant things is him trying to make sure that like the time that he has with her before she finds out and before he loses her, because as he says, like, and I'll pay the ultimate price now because you're going to turn away from me. Like before that happens, making sure that he can experience as much joy with her and provide her with as much joy as possible, which makes it all very sad. And again, it makes me read his decision at the end of the first season as less selfish. Because I think he really thought he would lose her for it.
Yeah.
I think it was one of those things where like you do the thing that you think is right for that person, even if it will cost you them, because like, I mean, like parents do this all the time, right? Like when you decide to like be the bad guy, knowing that your kid's going to be angry with you, knowing that they're going to be upset, but you're thinking long game. And so you're like, I'd much rather that in the interim, you're angry with me and upset.
Yeah.
And I'll take the hurt. I'll take on the hurt and pain of that so that you can be okay in the long term. And I'm reading this now a lot more like that than as just like a selfish action to take care of me.
Yes.
Because of how he was acting in the interim, I think he was like, I only have so much time.
There was this sadness that you saw in Joel when he felt like he did a good job. Like you could see he starts to cry.
Yeah. I think part of that is Sarah too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. One thing that I feel like it's a moment where I understand where Ellie was coming from. And it's when she calls out Joel's lie to Gail, the therapist, after they bring back Eugene. I have mixed feelings about it. I'm still processing it. I think what I've landed here, at least temporarily, and I'm open for you or for anyone in the comment section to kind of give us their thoughts about that moment. I think Ellie was in a lot of pain and she is justifiably angry at Joel. I think she was wrong in how she handled it though. Again, I think Joel's just thinking long term. It is easier for Gail to heal and process losing her spouse with the story that Joel provided, if that's the last memory that she can have, like the most tangible memory. And Ellie just wasn't thinking about that in that moment. And I know there's a cause and effect there, because if Joel had been honest with her before, she goes along with it, and so it's not just all on Ellie in that moment. Joel bears some responsibility there too. It's such a messy moment where like Gail just happened to be like a collateral damage there.
Yeah. Because like Joel's reasoning for not telling Gail the truth, I don't think was about self-preservation. I don't think he was trying to protect himself in any way.
No.
I don't think that was about himself and trying to protect his own self-image. I truly think it was like this, like you were saying, this is just like a less painful version of the story, and it truly does not do her any good to know how things played out.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't help her.
Yeah.
I also think the decision with Eugene, listen, Ellie, there is no way that your father figure is going to put you on a horse with Eugene in the back bitten by a zombie 10 minutes ago. That's not happening, sis. It's a reasonable thing for Joel to not do. Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry. I really wish he hadn't promised her that. I also think he knew she wasn't going to give up the fight.
Yeah. And if it's like a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. One, obviously, when Tommy says, I'll see you next year.
What?
They don't. The next time Tommy sees Joel is after what happens with Abby. They don't see each other again.
Wait, oh.
Yes.
Damn, I think I just assumed they probably laid eyes on each other somewhere in that time.
Maybe they catch each other before Joel goes out on patrol, but I don't remember seeing a scene with them there.
I do. Okay, I could be wrong, but in the things that they were showing in the post credit, the way that they were talking to Pedro, that was feeling like that was his last episode.
It could be, yeah.
I kind of think that's the last we're gonna see him, just because they showed a lot of scenes of like Neil Druckmann giving like these big speeches, and it was giving past tense. It was like, you have been able to bring this character to life in a way that I didn't think was possible. Yeah. I'm like, that's giving it's done. That's giving Pedro's done on set.
It's interesting because that porch scene, they sort of combined it with two different scenes from the game. There is a scene where Joel admits what happened with the Fireflies. And I thought that's what we were going to get in the trailer when you see Ellie say you swore, but then they added that little twist, which I actually kind of liked. And then later on, we get the porch scene. But in the show, they combined those two things together, which I got to say, I know some people didn't really like that decision. I'm gonna be real with y'all though, it makes sense. I feel like it's a little bit different when we're playing a video game nonstop, right? And a lot of us, we beat that game in like a week, maybe 2 weeks, probably less than that. In terms of a television show, to get the reveal that Ellie all this time was willing to forgive Joel, to not revisit that scene until the finale, which is essentially the last scene or one of the last final moments of the video game. Bro, we wouldn't get that until like 2029, 2030. I feel like the emotional impact just would not have landed. Now. Yes.
It explains what Ellie is doing.
Yeah.
It explains it because you understand now she didn't get the chance to go on the forgiveness journey with Joel that she'd promised.
Right.
There's just this lack of closure there.
And this is what we were trying to say last week when we were talking about The Last of Us. When you're adapting something like this into a TV show, when you're thinking about character arcs and character journeys, those are some of the difficult decisions that you just have to make in terms of like, do we wait 6 years to see that because we're getting 2 years, a year and a half in between these seasons of The Last of Us, or do we try to reveal this a little bit early so that each season Ellie gets somewhat of a character arc? It's not a simple decision. It's not as black and white as just mimic the game and then you'll be fine. It doesn't work like that with television.
Yeah, no, yeah. This landed for me beautifully.
Yeah.
This landed for me absolutely beautifully. No notes for anybody involved.
I've decided that like I can't look at the comment section anymore because you're just seeing all these mix of like people that haven't watched the video game love it, and then the video game people, this is the worst show on television. Like it's I can't do it anymore. I'm just like, listen, I have accepted that it's not possible to have the adaptation done exactly like the video game. I also am not looking for television to do that. I think that's just the difference.
I also am like,
I'm going in watching it to enjoy a show, not watching it to relive when I play the video game. If I wanted to do that, I just play the video game. It's not the same thing.
I also just like, what happened to the art of critiquing the things that you enjoy? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you can still take issue with some of the changes without throwing the whole show in the trash can. You know what I mean? Like, God. You can be like, oh, I wish they would have told it this way. Like, one criticism that I've heard that I'm like, this does kind of make sense. The decision to have us as the viewers know Abby's intentions right away versus apparently in the game when you did not know and you had to go on this journey with her to understand.
Yeah.
I do understand that criticism. I do think that the show maybe would have been a little bit more compelling.
She was also a lot
to not know.
Yeah. She was also a lot bigger in the video game, which felt like, come on, yeah. I think there was backlash, obviously, from like just a bunch of incels. And I am wondering if HBO kind of backtracked a little bit on that.
It's possible. I do really like that actress playing her.
No, she's great. But that physique of Abby, at least to me, because she became one of my favorite characters, is an important thing. It says a lot about the relationships and the dynamics that she has with certain characters and with the wolves and yeah, there's just a lot. So there
could be some of that too. So yeah, but again, it's like you can state these criticisms and be like, I wish they would have done things differently, and still enjoy the project. I don't understand why we've abandoned that.
Yeah.
It's like, quick subject change. I just really briefly, I have to talk about this show on Netflix, Forever. The biggest thing I just want to say is that as a Black girl who grew up loving romance and like fantasizing about it all the time, having something like this, like, it is healing my inner child. This type of like just completely head over heels, hopeless romantic coming of age type of story told about Black children. I don't think we have anything like it ever. I don't think there's ever been anything like it. And I'm so grateful. I am so grateful to all of the people creating it, and everybody should go and watch it.
Well, those are our thoughts. We'd love to know what you all think about this episode of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6. Let us know in the comment section below. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.